What am I in the context of the universe as a whole? And why am I asking this question? First person perspective. The experience of a centralized observer and an environment. What does it feel like right now to be a first person observer? Put your focus, your mind on the experience right now of being a first person observer. And think about the fact that no matter how you look at things, you're always looking at them from your own perspective. I mean, even if you have like an out of body experience, even if you have um, some kind of dream, whatever you experience is from the point of perspective of first person. Is this even possible to look at from another angle? Is it possible to separate first person perspective from an observer? Even if I see myself sitting over there, I'm still seeing it from my own perspective. So, this leads me to believe that first person perspective is deeper than human eyeballs and a brain. Philosophically, from any point of perspective, all witnessed events happen in first person. And that's our real experience. That's our lived every day. We go about our lives looking at them from our own angle. So when I ask, what am I mean, what is so fundamental about the fact that I exist that I would categorize it as my true nature or essence or whatever have you, my what I am really? Because I could say, well, I'm a man. I could say I'm a human being. I could say I'm a musician, this, that, and the other thing. But I could be not those things and I would still be here. in most cases. In most of those cases, if not all, in fact, I think my consciousness would still persist. And so, will anything die? Does anything die? Buildings, cities, civilizations. Do they die, or are they just transformed? Because if you demolish a building, you end up with the same rubble and dust that you started with. It's all just, you know what I mean? Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And so everything is made out of energy. And when we think about this, we realize the temporary nature of all things. They come and go. But that only happens because the energy that makes up those things is not temporary. It exists. It's almost a requirement for the amalgams of energy or the compiled behaviors of energy as things, particles and stuff that are temporary. And it's almost like they're required because of the nature of infinity. So, what is infinity? Infinity is the antithesis of nothing. Infinity is the fact that something actually exists within a field of statistics and probability. Something concrete exists. You can count and add all numbers and not reach infinity. And you have this concept called zero, which is like nothing. Now, the problem is, when speaking on a level of reality and existence, there is no such thing as nothing. Nothing can only closely describe infinity, masquerading as nothing, because anything that is nothing, well, the only things that would fall into that category is things that don't exist, which would actually make them potentials. Now, there's this one syntactical thing you can do, like since an airplane didn't just fly through my house, uh, infinity isn't real, because that would have been a possibility for that to just happen right then. And since it didn't, um, but you can count all numbers and add them and not reach infinity. Infinity implies existence. Think about 1/3. Now, if you were going to use a protractor and a ruler and you had a pizza, you wanted to split it up for 3 different people, how would you do this? Well, you would say 1/3 per person. And then you go to divide the pizza into 3 slices. Well, in order to get the radius, you need pi. You need the circumference. You need measurements of the pizza. You need to know how big the pizza is so that you can divide it evenly. And you can probably see where I'm going with this, because 1 divided by 3 is 33.3 infinitely repeating. Yet infinitely repeating 3's times 3 is infinitely repeating 9's. So you have this missing part of this pizza that's based on these fractions that says, okay, well, you can have 33.333%. I can have 33 point, you know what I'm saying? Infinitely repeating 3's. Add together to make 10. And this is the nature of infinity. This is the nature of infinity. It's greater than the sum of its parts. Are there even parts? I mean, infinity can only be comprehended by infinite beings. Energy can never be created or destroyed, therefore it's infinite. Consciousness. Now we're understanding the whole point. What does it feel like to have first-person perspective? What do you notice right now? What are you aware of? Is there a sensation? I argue that first-person perspective, aka the not only angle at which, but the immediacy of experience, the angle of which we observe things, and the immediacy of the experience are more fundamental to existence than the specific observer itself. First-person perspective is a requirement for an environment to exist. The glue that holds together the anything that makes up the world in which you are embedded is first-person perspective, which is your core processing software. And it's a nuance to say that this is any different from, the theory that consciousness is at the center of all things. Because in a way, I'm kind of using the terms interchangeably. It's just that when we think about consciousness, we kind of go zoned out for a minute. We really don't understand what consciousness actually means. But Why ask this question of who am I in the reference of the whole universe? Well, because you learn some things about yourself and about the universe. For example, nature is alive. Nature as a whole, nature as an infinitely divisible subset of categories that represent the whole in each of them, no matter how many times you've divided. You know what I'm saying? Any piece of nature is holographic and represents the entire intelligence in the same way that any other piece does, and in the same way that the entire piece does. How is this possible? Well, because there's a communication between the whole and the observer. This, now, I've said before that this is the smallest possible experience, but I guess only on a level that there is no smallest observer. It's just the single experience, the nature of qualia, that is the ground floor of this communication between the whole and the part. The whole, who knows? I mean, maybe what I can perceive as everything is just like a small slice, but it's still considered the entire system from that perspective. Infinity, it would never end, you know. And so I don't know if you guys have seen the DMT laser experiment, but people see this code and it looks like the Matrix. And Dan Goler, the guy who discovered this, is really smart. And I hate to be this frank, but like, if he could get some uh, rebranding for his YouTube channel, I think that, a lot could be changed. He has podcasts and interviews and stuff, but if he would just go on there and talk, kind of like I do, and express his ideas without being interviewed by somebody who has no fucking clue what's going on, no offense, but like, or maybe have an ego-free discussion with somebody who does know what's going on. And some of his podcasts are great. Like, I love his interviews and stuff, but I'm just saying, he kind of describes this like, now don't let me misquote you here. Dan, if you're seeing this, like, huge fan, let me know about an interview. uh He's describing like a upward spiraling staircase, and each like 3 or 4 or however many, is a subsection. And so there's subsections stacked going up and down, you know, and each subsection is governed by a certain level of intelligence. And there are different beings that have this level of intelligence that govern the functions of reality. And we're down here, we tend to say down here because of suffering, but we're here governing these baryonic slices of stuff that we can pick up and put down. But it's also like a quasi thing because there's the whole mental consciousness, first person perspective. And so I think personally what's happening is that we're on sort of like an outward, like when a flower opens up, it's like from the center to the outward bloom where the colors and hallucinations and stuff are, which is just 5D. I know that sounds disappointing, but like really is just 5D. But think of it as a toroid. Think of us as on the inside of the donut, but as space quote unquote expands, as they would say in the standard model, what it's expanding towards is the outside of the toroid where hyperspace colors exist and the dead abide, you know? And psychedelics hold the key into unlocking this kind of understanding. They always have. In fact, they've been guides for humanity. It's a shame the way people look at these plant medicines in the modern era, because they have literally guided us here from being monkeys in the jungle. Throughout human history, since the Bible, since before the Bible, there have been recordings of psychedelic and evidence of psychedelic usage throughout culture. And anybody who's had a deep trip will tell you that there's a good reason that they exist. People who have only had terrifying trip and then put it down will probably tell you the exact opposite, but usually those people don't go out speaking against medicine because it doesn't work for them. Like if you're allergic to Benadryl, you don't tell people not to take Benadryl. And to those people, I want to say I'm sorry, and I really wish that you had not had a terrifying experience. But in a way, it's kind of what you probably needed. Because the thing about the human psyche is that corners of the mind which we ignore cause harm. And in order to get rid of that harmful tendency, certain things have to be illuminated. And now I'm not saying it's impossible to just randomly have a bad trip about something that has nothing to do with you. But I would say most of the time when people have bad trips, it's because they're processing something that they need to process, even though they might not be ready for it. Or they have no other way to learn this information other than this terrifying presentation. And that's just a product of circumstance, and it's unfortunate, but psychedelics illuminate the parts of the mind that need attention. And so this might be controversial, but I actually advocate for people trying them again who have had bad experiences, in a safe environment with trusted people, and medical professional, legal, all that, or, as much of that, close to that as you can get, because it's a shame to walk away from something like that with an opinion and an experience that's not helpful, when you could have one that would be tenfold in magnitude, but on a positive valence. It could be like the ultimate realization of godhood or something. And the point is that, these perspectives, all of these perspectives, have been given to us with the usage of mind expanding substances like psilocybin, mushrooms and things like ergamine and, ayahuasca. But these perspectives exist and are accessible by humans. And they're thoughts and ideas that have gotten us here through history, whether it be Leonardo da Vinci, whether it be Plato, Socrates, whether it be philosophers, whether it be, world leaders. The ideas that allow us to come up with theories like geometry and, um, life science, they exist already in the sense that an iceberg exists already when you make a sculpture out of it. So we're kind of just like sculpting away at this iceberg by thinking in general about things. And then the details, are what the facts of the way things work end up being. When we latch on to something and pull it into the physical world with language. And so we're looking for these ideas and we find them, but only when they become concrete do they make sense. So these ideas have been, changing over history, because right now we're talking about things that, 50 years ago. And now I'm not saying history is right. I'm just saying the things that guide us now are different than the things that guided us back then. They thought about the relationships between physical objects and came up with geometry. They thought about the relationship between the distances of the stars in the sky, and they came up with like Euclidean geometry and stuff. And that turned into sacred geometry, which turned into mandala art and stuff like that. Hindu and like Eastern cultures, the symbolism. But the point is, there's another space. There's another space, and it's I'm only classifying it as another space because the things there are fundamentally different than the things here. And that difference is only as fundamental as this 14 billion years. But like things here, most things seem to function off physical principles. And the things there are classified with a set of physics that do not govern the universe, even though that is part of the universe. It's just a different part, and we've been classifying things wrong. It's a hallucinatory world filled with shapes and colors and, landscapes and worlds and entities. I've never seen entities, though, personally. I just know a lot of people have. And I've felt presences before, but I've never had direct communication with entities. Now, if you consider having an intuit, like a voice in your head, like an intuition about something, as contact with an entity, and I have seen aliens, but I've never sat there and had like a insectoid do, surgery on me or whatever. I've never had a full-blown breakthrough experience. And I'm more about the scientific and, logical side of things. Uh, but really, that space is accessible with psychedelics. It's accessible without them too. And it is where these ideas exist. This iceberg at which we are chipping away is a real thing. It's as real as the physical world, but it's outside the light cone. You know what I mean? It's non-local. And sometimes they interact through human perception. The key is the consciousness of the first person observer that allows these two worlds to interact.